Okay, let's get started on today's topic because we've got a lot to cover, and also I need to answer your questions when they come in. So remember, if you've got a question, QQ in front, please ask. So today's topic is a system for communicating value. So I covered a few months back, and it's on my YouTube channel. You can check it out. We did a session on how to communicate value. And you enjoyed it so much, you loved it, that you then voted for this one, which is how to then systemize the process. So let me just recap with a few thoughts around value and communication. I would suggest to you that this is one of the, if not the most important part of the whole value pricing. Some people think that value pricing is simply a case of coming up with a price, with coming up with a number. And whilst that's a very important part of value pricing, coming up with the price, I would suggest to you that the most important part of value pricing is how do we communicate to the client the value of what we do for them? Because you can easily come up with a higher price, that's simple. But if the client doesn't understand the value, they're going to say those words we all hate. Wow, that's expensive. That's more than I was expecting. So if we hate that reaction, if we want to avoid that reaction, we have to become better at communicating value. And last time I ran this session, and if you missed it, we'll put the link to the last session in the description below, and probably at the end we'll mention it. If you came along last time, I talked about a number of different strategies, things that you can use in the area of communication. Some of those were, if you are communicating in writing, you want to get the price out of the way early. So if you sent a quote, a proposal through the mail or via email, you want to get the price out of the way early. However, having said that, the very best way to communicate value and talk about pricing is face-to-face. I also talked about last time how you need to focus on the pain. And we'll talk a bit more about that in today's session. We need to focus on pain. We also need to understand a technique that marketers use, which is called turning features into benefits. And again, I'll touch a little bit more on that again today. And we also looked at something called quantification, the importance of quantifying, coming up with a number for the pain or the benefits. And that's one of the most powerful strategies that we can use, because when we quantify something, when we put a number on something, firstly, it becomes more real to the client. If we said to the client, if you're late submitting your tax return, you will get penalties. That's not going to grab their attention so much as saying, if you're late submitting your tax return, you could get penalties, and they could amount to as much as $1,000. I'm making the number up. But then suddenly the client's thinking, wow, $1,000. That's more real to the client than just a vague penalties. And so we want to use quantification wherever possible. We want to use numbers. We want to quantify the pain. We want to quantify the end results. We want to quantify the outcomes, the benefits. So that helps with making the value more real. Of course, when we quantify, because we're value pricing, when we quantify pain, when we quantify value, it also helps us, of course, with coming up with the price. Because if we know that we can do some work for the client and help them to avoid penalties of $1,000 by submitting their return on time, then we can actually build that into as part of our pricing. The more pain that we can take away, the more benefit, the more value, and therefore the higher the price can be. So that was last time out. We looked at those various strategies, those ideas, and if you want to recap on that, as I say, we'll put the link in the description. It's on my YouTube channel. It's about 2 months ago that I ran it. So today what I'm going to do is cover three different areas, 3 systems, because communication is so important that we need to systemize the process. And many of you who hear me regularly I often say that one of my favorite business books of all time, and I would argue it should be compulsory reading for any business owner, is Michael Gerber's The E-Myth Revisited. And Michael Gerber is the expert on systems. We should systemize what we do. Systems are so important in any business. And I know you get that because Generally speaking, accounting professionals, accountants, bookkeepers, we are probably the most systematic people. We love systems. We have checklists for everything. We have tax return preparation checklists. We have audit checklists. We have bookkeeping. Reconciling a bank account is a system. We have systems for everything. Standard processes, checklists. We have standard forms, standard letters, and so on. And systems are critically important. The words that we say, the scripts are so important. But most businesses don't have systems. Most small clients don't, most small businesses do not have systems because many people aren't as systematic as accountants and bookkeepers tend to be. So you get the whole idea of systems. However, the one area of systemization that we tend to lack in professional service firms is we are not very systematic when it comes to pricing. We either make it up as we go along, or we have a bad system. A bad system is a timesheet and logging hours and just adding up hours and charging based on hours with an hourly rate. That's a bad system. There are better systems, but most people don't have pricing systems in their business. So today is really about systems. It's about having a system to communicate the value. And I'm going to share 3 ideas with you, 3 broad types of systems that you should be considering when you are having the conversation, the value conversation, when you're communicating the value of what you do. So the first one, number 1, is you need to have a system for uncovering what is value. We need to uncover that. I teach something called the 3 stages of the value conversation, and part of today will be looking at stages 1 and 2. The value conversation is essentially the structured process or system we go through when we have a price conversation. And pricing, by the way, whether we like it or not, pricing is part of the sales process. So when we're talking price, we are in a sales conversation, essentially. And we need a system for doing that. And part of that sales process is communicating value, pricing based on that value. And there are 3 stages that we go through. Stage 1 is we want to uncover the value, because we need to make sure that we understand what's important to the client. We want to understand what's value to them, because when we better understand value to them, what's valuable, then we can firstly come up with a better solution, a better service. And secondly, when we understand value and then we create more value, we can charge a higher price, and the client will gladly pay that higher price because they're getting something which is value to them. So system 1 is we have to systemize the process of how do we uncover that value? How do we find out what's important to the client? And that's about having a process for asking questions. Questions are so important. I sometimes call it the fact find. We need to ask the right questions. We need to have a system for doing it. And the idea with our questions is to start to understand what's important to the client. What do they want out of their life? What are their goals for their life? What's their vision? What do they want their business to look like when it's done? What's their goals, their vision for their business? What are the problems they're facing right now? What's the pain, the challenges, the obstacles in their way? What's important to them? We find that out by asking questions. And it's something that we are reasonably good at when we take on a brand new client. When we have a brand new client, we meet with them and we'd ask some questions to understand a bit about them. We can probably improve that process, but we have a process. Unfortunately, what we often do then is once we acquire a client, we forget that process. We don't have that same conversation every single year. We assume that we know them now, but business owners, their needs change, their wants change, their goals change, their vision changes. And so what we should do is systemize the process of uncovering the value, not just in that very first conversation with a prospective client, but every single year with our existing clients. And as part of systemizing that process, we want to have some standard questions. We have to understand what are the right questions to ask. What are the questions going to help us to understand the value? And part of that system, I would suggest, is having an agenda. An agenda is a system. An agenda is the standard things that you will talk about in a meeting. We should, by the way, if we're talking about systems, we should have agendas for every meeting we have with a client, we should have an agenda, because when you have an agenda, when you create an agenda is a system. It's just another system. And it's a powerful system because when you have an agenda, firstly, it demonstrates to your client or your prospective client that you care enough about them, that you did some advanced preparation before the meeting, that you thought about this, that you're not just winging it, you're not just making it up as you go along. You've prepared for this meeting. An agenda turns your invisible preparation time into something tangible. It shows you care. But an agenda also is a great way of keeping you on track, to make sure that you cover the really important things, that you plan the process. So when you're having the value conversation, when you're talking about one of your services, when you're meeting with a potential client, your agenda should include some really powerful questions. So you systemize the process of what are great questions. And the sorts of questions you want to ask are some background questions that helps you to understand the client, like why did they go into business in the first place? What are their goals in life? And those are questions that we are fairly comfortable with. You probably ask those sorts of questions when you meet a potential new client. But there are more important questions. We need to ask the questions to really uncover what's the pain that they're going through? What are the problems they are facing? So when I was in practice many years ago, when I built a system for asking questions for the fact find, my favorite question, which I originally started using for paid for consulting advisory processes, I found the question so powerful, I used it with every brand new client I met. And the question was this. So tell me, thinking about your business right now, what are your three biggest challenges? What are your three biggest challenges right now? And that was a fascinating question because it would get the business owners to start thinking about what's their biggest problems? What are the three biggest challenges? And the better you understand those, the better you can understand what their problems are, understand their challenges, the better that we then become at helping them solve that problem, helping them solve the pain, at building a solution. And we'll talk more about why that is so important very, very soon. So system number one is you want to have a structured process for the fact find, for asking questions, a standard agenda with great questions. And then in that first meeting with the client, you ask questions and you listen and make notes. Okay, the second thing that we then need to do, the second system, is once we've systemized the process of uncovering the value, now what we do, and this is stage two of the value conversation, now we want to build up the value. This is where we build up and communicate the value of what we do. And there's a number of things that we would do within this building of value. Part of it would be making sure we have the right solution. We give the client a series of choices, options, menu pricing, which many of you know I teach that a lot. There's other sessions, other videos on my YouTube channel about menu pricing. But as part of that building up the value, we want to systemize the process of communicating value. So what do we say to the client? What are the things we say in a meeting to communicate value? What do we say and in what order? And so we need to understand what's the structure of that conversation for building up value. And I'm going to go through some of that now. But given that our focus today is on systems, how do we systemize that process? How do we make sure that we say the right things in the right order? Well, either our systems need to be a series of scripts, the words that we say. Scripts are really powerful systems. Just think of McDonald's. You go into McDonald's to buy a burger. You say, I want a Big Mac, please. You know they will say to you, do you want to make that a meal deal? It's a system. It's a script. And you need your equivalent scripts. But this is a long process. So how do you make sure you keep on track? Well, the way you do that is having a system like a professional looking brochure. What do I mean by that? One of the things I help people do in the Value Pricing Academy is I create professional brochures for a whole range of different accounting services. So, for example, this is somebody's brochure for bookkeeping. Okay, it's a professional looking brochure for bookkeeping service. This would be for setting up a cloud accounting system. This is somebody's payroll brochure. This is for management reporting. This is for incorporating and forming a limited company for a client. And the purpose of having something like a professional looking brochure is partly it's professional looking. So it's what marketers call packaging. When you package up what you do beautifully, it increases the client's perception of the quality of what you do. If you have a service nicely packaged like this, it impacts on the perception of quality. And when they perceive higher levels of quality, they will expect to pay you a higher price. This is why companies like Apple spend so much resource and money on the packaging of their products, because they know that influences the perception of the quality. But actually the most powerful reason for having something like a professional looking brochure is, yes, it's part of marketing, but actually the real reason, the most powerful reason, is this becomes your script. It's your agenda for the meeting. It's your aide-memoire, your reminder of what to say in the right order. So let's go through the overview of the conversation. So the process is you've done that first system. You've asked the right questions. You understand the client better. You understand what their goals are, what's important to them, what their problems, their challenges are. You've hopefully made notes. Now you understand better what the solution might be. The solution might be business advisory services, which we'll talk about next week in the Business Advisory Masterclass. That might be the solution to their problems. So now you've got to communicate the value of that. How do you do that? How do you communicate the value of your advisory solutions? Well, the first thing you do, the first part of the conversation, is you want to build up the pain in their mind, because people are more motivated by the avoidance of pain than they are by the attainment of gain. So we want to talk about pain. What's the problem in their business right now? What's going wrong? What are the problems they're either having now, right now? What's the pain they're having now? Or what's the problem or pain they will have in the future if they don't change, if they don't take action? And some of those problems, some of those pains, you will have uncovered by asking great questions. But also with your system, your brochure, you can use that to prompt you and remind you of other things to talk about. So if you were systemizing the communication of, for example, a tax return service, you'd want to remind yourself that one of the pains is if you don't submit it, you will get fines and penalties. And you'll want to use things like quantification to build up the pain and talk about, what's worst case, what could actually happen, what could happen if you don't submit your return over the next 12 months. If it's bookkeeping, you might talk about some of the problems, the pain of them trying to do the bookkeeping themselves and what goes wrong. So we talk about the pain first in our conversation. And in your system, in your brochure, you would put some paragraphs or bullet points of all the different pain points that you can think of to do with that service, the pain that service takes away and removes. And ideally what you want to do is, when you have your script, your system, your brochure for talking about pain, you want to give examples and quantification. Use numbers to build up the pain and also use examples. So if you're talking about a tax compliance service and the problems of penalties, interests, inquiries from the tax authorities, you might have a story of somebody you met once who got the wrong side of the IRS, the HMRC, the tax authorities, and that business ended up going out of business because of the problems. So think of some examples, some real stories of people, some horror stories, because when you tell horror stories, what that does is it makes the pain more real. It makes the client think, wow, that's scary. I don't want that happening to me. I need this service. I need this help. I need to do it right. So we systemize the process of talking about pain. Once we've done that, then what we do is we talk about the outcomes, the end results. So again, in your system, your scripts, your brochure, you would then talk about, if they buy your service, let's say it's business advisory, you then talk about what would things look like when you've finished the service or further down the line. What would their business look like if you've worked with them for 12 months, every single month? giving them ideas to grow their business, helping them increase their profitability. What could their business possibly look like? You want to talk about outcomes. What could be the end result? Because that's what people are buying from us, remember. People aren't buying what you do. Nobody's interested in buying an hour of your time. What they're interested in is you taking away their problems, their pain, and making their life better. So we systemize the process for describing and talking about the outcomes. And again, we use quantification wherever possible. We use numbers. Next, what we then want to do is, if you become really good at talking about the pain that you'll take away, the problems you'll solve, if you're really good at painting a picture of the outcome, there's a good chance the client will say, that's awesome, I need that, what will it cost? That's the price question. And as part of your communicating value, you want to have a script for that. What are the words that you're going to say? How are you going to answer that? Because very often, as you know, clients have a habit of asking the price question really early on in the price conversation. And you haven't finished building up the value. You should never give a price until you've fully communicated the value, communicated the benefits. And so what do you do if they ask that price question early? You need a script, you need a process, you need to have a way of answering that you pre-thought through that explains why you can't give a price yet. You've still got things to talk about. So then what you do is, once the client wants to buy from you, we have to recognize that everybody's different. Everybody values things differently. And so one of the things we want to do is give them some choices, some options. And one way of doing that is menu pricing, is give them a choice of your entry-level offering, the bronze level, if you like, the middle one, the silver, and the premium gold option. Because some clients will see so much value in what you do, they will choose to pay you more money if you offer that option and communicate the value. We should always give them different choices. So you then need to, in your brochure, in your system, is communicate the different choices, the different options for the client, the benefits of those options, and help the client to identify which one's right for them, which one will best meet their needs, best solve their problems, best help them to achieve what they want out of life. And then what we do is, as we talk through what we then do, we have to remember that people don't buy features, they buy benefits. They don't buy what you do, they buy the end result. So when you start talking about what you will then do, when you talk about the bank reconciliations you'll do, when you talk about the meetings that you'll have with the client, when you talk about the reports that you'll produce, always bear in mind that however great those things are, they're features. If you say to the client, as part of setting up on your cloud accounting system, we'll set up your chart of accounts. We know that's a great thing to do. The client has no idea what a chart of accounts is. So what we have to do is use a process which I covered last time of turning features into benefits. In other words, we tell the client what we do, but more important, why do we do it? What's the problem that's solving? And what's the benefit to the client? And that's another place that your system comes in. So you need to make sure that if you have a package, for example, these are the 15 things that you do as part of bookkeeping. You have to, as part of the communication, tell the client for each of those 15 things why you do them and how does the client benefit. What's the reason? What's the benefit to the client? Because that's how they then think. When you explain the benefit, they think, I get that now. That's really important. I need that feature. I need my bank account reconciling. You have to communicate the benefits. And so your system for that might well be your brochure, where in the brochure you would go through and you would describe the benefits of all the things that you do. Okay, so we've covered two systems so far. Your agenda or standard questions for uncovering the value. We want a system for how we communicate the value, of which a brochure, scripts are a great thing to do. And the third area I want to talk about is, which really builds on some of the things that I've talked about, is we want to make sure that we have a system for how do we demonstrate the value? How do we demonstrate value? And we'll be going deeper on this in the business advisory masterclass, but to help people understand the value of something, and I'm going to use business advisory as an example right now. If you're talking to a client about how you can help them grow their business, increase their profitability, improve their cash flow, build a more successful, more valuable business, it may be you've got your business advisory service. How do you communicate the value, the benefit to the client of your advisory? Well, there are really three things that you do as part of your system. One of the things that you want to do is use your skills with numbers. So we've talked on this before about quantification. We want to make sure that we are using numbers all the time, because that's our skill set. We understand numbers better than anybody else. If you're selling an advisory service, then you want to talk about what might be the impact on their bottom line profit, on their top line sales, on the value of their business, on their cash flow, a year, 2, 3 years from now, if you work with them closely through advisory. Now, you might say, I don't know. But just because we don't know what the number is, an estimate, a guesstimate is better than nothing, because the client has no idea. And therefore, if they have no idea what difference it might make, then they're not going to see any value. So we have to use numbers wherever possible. So remember that quantification is one of the most powerful things that we can do. A second thing that we want to do when we're demonstrating value is we want to demonstrate with ideas, with examples. We want to tell the client some great things that we can do that is going to help them get the result they want. So if, for example, again, we're talking about business advisory and you're talking to a client about that, you might share with them some numbers about what might happen to their business if, for example, they were to increase the number of new customers by 10% over next year. You might calculate and show them what impact it might have if they also increase their price by 10% and only lost 5% of customers. You could play with numbers because you're the numbers expert and see what impact it might have on their profit. But then we want to back that up with some ideas, some examples. Because you might say to the client, if we work together over the next 12 months and we show you how to increase your average prices by 10%, and if you only lose 5% of clients, then mathematically your profit will increase by $50,000 over the next 12 months. That helps to build the value. But the client's going to then say, yeah, but how would I do that? So you want to give some ideas, give some examples of things they could possibly do. And that will help them to think, I could do that. Right, I can start to see some value now. And the third thing we do, so we demonstrate with numbers, we demonstrate with some examples, some ideas. The third thing we want to do, and this is more at the expert level, this is where you get really good at communicating value, is you demonstrate with stories. You demonstrate with stories. And one of the things that you want to become obsessed with and having some systems for is collecting success stories, collecting case studies from your clients when you help them to get great results. Whenever a client gets a great result, you want to get that story in writing, even better as a video, because stories, case studies are one of the most powerful forms of marketing. So again, think about advisory. If you said to a client that we've crunched some numbers, we think we could help you increase your bottom line profits by $100,000 over next year. And here's some examples of some of the sorts of things we could work on to do that. We could put in place a structured pricing system. We could help you with some ideas for getting more referrals so you get more customers. Let me just share a story of somebody else that we were working with last year. And when we started working with them, they were really struggling. And at the end of 6 months, they'd increased their bottom line profit from a struggling break even to $50,000 in just 6 months. In fact, they've done a video. Let's watch that video together. When you share a story like that, that's creating proof. That's demonstrating that, yes, you can get these results. You've done it for somebody else, similar to them, another business owner. That's demonstrating, proving you can get results. That's demonstrating you can create value for people. And it's going to help them to say yes and buy from you. Okay, so there's some systems for you for communicating your value. The uncovering the value, using things like a professional looking brochure to help you with that structured process, like the conversation, and then having some specific systems for demonstrating value through numbers, ideas, examples, and stories. Okay, we have 20 minutes left. We're going to answer questions. Just before I go into questions, firstly, if you have got a question, remember, put QQ in front of your question. We'll look at those. I can see straight away there's one from DD Huey. I'll come on to that one, but I need to go and see which the first one is, if there's one before that. So what questions have you got? I think Neil Campbell might be the first one. So just bear with me a second. I'm just scrolling back through the chat to make sure I don't miss anybody. And there's probably a few other people that, some quick shout outs as well. So Kelly Fowler is here. Hi there. Hi there, Kelly. Good to see you from Canada, like most people here today. We do have Russell Mons is here. Hi, Russell from Florida. Russell, I have Sarah's forwarded on your emails to me, and I will come back to you, Russell, very soon. Linda's here also from Florida. Hi there, Linda Rolfe. Good to see you again. I know you come to many. Cruise Crazy is Ed Collis. Okay, thank you, Ed, for clarifying that. Amy is here from Utah. And Dee Dee says, happy Thanksgiving. I will answer your question in a second. Okay, we have also from Canada, Isabel. Hi, Isabel. From Canada, Sarah Lewin is here. Okay, let me find those questions. Oh, and of course, I'll invite Sarah just to put the link in again. Next week is the Business Advisory Masterclass. So if you'd like to spend 3 days with me, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of next week, we go deep on everything to do with running a business advisory service, how to package it, how to spot opportunities with clients, how to price it, how to communicate the value. So we'll look at more of this topic specifically with business advisory in mind. That's all next week. That happens Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. If you'd like to join me, register your place. Sarah's going to put the link in the chat box. When you register, it's completely free. It's complimentary training. And when you register, what we'll do is you'll get some emails reminding you, put it in your calendar, and most importantly, you'll get an email 15 minutes before each of the Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday sessions. So next week, we'll have lots of time to answer questions. But today, let's see, what have we got? I'm still going through the chat box. Right, Neil Campbell, I think, was the first question that came in. So what does Neil say? What are advisors doing for clients when it comes to managing risk and creating business resilience? Of course, Neil, I remember now. You reached out to me, I think, via LinkedIn, if I remember right. If I've got the right Neil. I don't know if that's a question for me. It's not one that I can necessarily answer. I think that's probably something that other people, is a question, I think, to ask of other people in the group. Neil, what I'm going to suggest is you're on Facebook right now. Ask that question in my Facebook group. Ask that question in Value Pricing with Mark Wickersham, and there are nearly 9,000 people in that group. So you'll get some feedback as to what people in the group are doing for their clients when it comes to managing risk. I assume that's a question for the community, in which case, please do ask that question. We have from Lebanon. Is that Lebanon in the Middle East? Farron? Hi there. I know you come regularly, Farron. I forget. I'm just not sure what MO is. We had a question. I think this has been answered, but hello from Greece. This is Dimitris asked a question. I think I saw someone answer it. What was the name of that book? But I know not everybody's on YouTube. The book that I mentioned, as some of you have said quite rightly, like Janine, for example, it's the E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. I think it's the best book on systems, how to systemize a business. It's been around for decades now. I think it should be compulsory reading for every business owner. It had a profound impact on me when I read it in 1998. And what I then started doing is I started giving it away, copies away for free to my clients when I was running my accounting firm, when I was doing advisory work, I would always give them a copy of the E-Myth. And I know that many other accountants that I've then worked on and helped with advisory and pricing also do the same thing. They gift their clients a copy of that book because it is so powerful. So thank you, Janine, for that. And I think, Ali, you also mentioned it as well. Okay. Next question. Neil says as well, Are you aware of a new process for accountants to make meetings more valuable and meaningful called agendally.com? Yes, I am. Neil, that's Bob Harper, who I've had Bob Harper as a guest before on one of these sessions. So Bob Harper is an accountant in the UK. Bob specialises in advisory work, and he's also really into this whole idea of having standard agendas for every single meeting, and he has a tool exactly for that. Right, Dee Dee said, what if you are virtual and don't need a brochure? Is your website a brochure? And Dee Dee, that's a really, really good question. And so obviously I was showing you some physical brochures, and they are really powerful if you are having face-to-face meetings. But as you know, the world's increasingly moving to this virtual world. Most of us now are having meetings online with tools like Zoom. So how does that change things? Well, how that changes things is, and what I recommend is that if you are having virtual meetings, you still go through the same process I've outlined today in terms of the making sure you've got systems for the words you say, systemizing the process of the questions. You can still use agendas. You just share them. You can send them in advance. You can have them on the screen. When it comes to a brochure, I still recommend you have a professional looking brochure, but you don't have to pay to get them printed. You could just have them as PDFs. And so a lot of the people in the Value Pricing Academy, what they'll do is they'll have their Zoom meetings or whatever system they're using, and they'll just use screen share. And with screen share, they can then walk people through the appropriate parts of the brochure. And I know some people are doing some really clever things, like is Jessica here? I think Jessica's here. Jessica from Florida. She uses a little piece of software which you may have seen. It looks like you are turning over the pages, so it's kind of got that feel of it's a real 3D brochure as you flick through it. And I think there's a few tools that do that. So Dee Dee, the concepts, everything I've taught today is relevant for virtual meetings as well. Just make sure that you use screen share to show people. Linda, hi there. Linda says, you're looking great, Mark. Good to be with you again. Linda, it's great to see you. It's been a while, I think, since it's only a while since I last saw you live at a physical event in the US. Unfortunately, these days of traveling, that's a little bit more challenging. I have a hello mark here from somebody who I know is definitely not an accountant or a bookkeeper. Joanne is a good friend of mine and my brother's partner. Hi, Joanne. Good to see you. I have no idea what you're doing here, but you are welcome. Leslie, this isn't a question, I don't think, but it's got a question mark. Hi, Leslie. I hope all is good with you. Linda says, do you have books I could purchase? Yeah, I guess so. I've written a number of books. How to Build a Successful Bookkeeping Business, Effective Pricing for Accountants, Price, the Fast Way to Change Profit, and the other one called Effective Pricing. Effective Pricing. So those, if you want to buy a book, you're welcome to. And I've just finished writing my latest book, which comes out early next year. I can't give you a date yet because that's in the hands of the publishers. But my existing books are all on Amazon in the UK, the US, and Canada, I believe. And they're also available on my website as well. But if you go to Amazon, you can get the Kindle version and you can get a paperback version, I believe. Okay, next question. I think Lisa from Sussex. Hi there, Lisa. What's your question? I'm really bad thinking on my feet, which has stopped me from doing the value conversation. Do you have advice for me? Probably Linda. Lisa. Probably Lisa. You are in my pricing academy, aren't you? So it's probably a case of me pointing you in the right direction. But my advice, Lisa, is create the system. So make sure that you do have an agenda for those initial meetings with people. Make sure that you do ask great questions to uncover the value. There's, of course, many more things you can have on agendas. Agendas are powerful for all sorts of things. For example, one of the things we know we should do is when we meet with a client and they're happy with what we do, we should ask for referrals, because we know that referrals is one of the best ways of growing an accounting firm. But we sometimes just forget to ask for referrals. Whereas if we put it on the agenda, if we have that as an agenda item, who else do you know that could benefit from our service? You can't not ask the question, because if you give a copy of the agenda to the client, they're going to think you're a bit weird, a bit odd if you skip things out. So agendas are great because they force you to ask things that sometimes you might forget because perhaps you're bad at thinking on your feet. So Lisa, I would suggest to you, Lisa, that the starting point for you is if you're bad at thinking on your feet, which we all are, plan the meetings in advance and have an agenda. Okay, and if you want, you could check out that Agendly by Bob Harper that was mentioned earlier. Have standard agendas for your meetings, think them through in advance, and use that. But by all means, Lisa, if you want some more help with that, either ask me in the Value Pricing Academy Facebook group or on one of our next live sessions. Okay, who else has got questions? Let me see. I've got a few more people saying hello, so hi, Michaela. We have, that's right, okay, Farron is from Missouri. That's Mo is Missouri. Forgive my ignorance, I'd forgotten that. Okay, we have, Neil said, thank you, I'll post that on the Facebook page. I think we've covered this, Lucy Ryan. I think we covered it because I think it was the question earlier. What about a digital brochure? And so yeah, digital brochures are great. Start with those. There's no point in printing out expensive brochures if most of your meetings are online. Leslie Hickerson, hi Leslie. Hope the mountain biking is going well. I'm sure it is for you because you go in all weathers, don't you? I'm using Canva for my brochure. Is there any other software that you recommend? I find Canva a bit awkward. Okay, that's interesting. No, I don't have any other recommendations other than because internally we use Canva a lot. We love Canva. Some of you will know that Emily uses Canva to design proposals for people using the effective pricing software. And my daughter Gabby loves Canva for designing the workbooks that you get if you're in the Pricing Academy. So we use Canva extensively. I, like you, Leslie, when I look at it, I sometimes feel a bit overwhelmed by it. And that's, I think, because it's such a... it's got so many features, Canva, including in the free version. That's one of the things I love about it. It's great. It's a great free tool. So I recommend Canva. But the other one, if it's just for your brochure, Leslie, then, and again, you're in the Academy, I think we put it in the Facebook group recently. Someone asked the same question, and Jessica shared the software that she uses that allows you to flip the pages. And I seem to remember that Jessica said that the downside with that software is it's a little bit limited, but that also sometimes might be an advantage for you, Leslie, because because you've got less features, it's easier just to get started and create your virtual brochure. Hope that helps, Leslie. But the other thing I would suggest, that will be I'll just pull it up again. That will be a great question perhaps to ask in the Facebook group. In the big Facebook group, because see what other people are using. What other software tools are people using for creating and designing brochures? I don't know, because we're 100% Canva. Okay, Lucy Ryan says, do you have brochures we can use? I think the answer might be no, and the reason I say that is because the brochures that I create are one of the key things that we do in the Value Pricing Academy and the Bookkeepers Pricing Academy. So if for people in the Value Pricing Academy, I think over the years I've created about 15 different brochures for different services, which you will get at some point if you're in my academy. I'm not aware, so we don't make them available for free. What we do though, what you can get access to is if you subscribe to the effective pricing software, there is a fixed price agreement template in there, which you can use as a starting point of some of the wording you can use for a fixed price agreement. Sarah, if you think of any resources that we have got that will help Lucy though, because I sometimes forget, over the decades I've been working with the accountants, I've created so many resources, videos on YouTube and links to eBooks and so on. I sometimes forget all the things that I've created. So it may be, Lucy, there is something somewhere that you can use. If Sarah thinks of anything, we'll point you in the right direction. Okay, how long? We've got 5 minutes left. Dee says, what about a Google slideshow? I don't use Google that much, but I assume by Google slideshow that includes PowerPoint presentations, any form of slideshow. And I think the question you're asking, Dee, is a slide deck, a slideshow, a great way of systemising the process of communicating value? And the answer I would suggest is yes. Why not? If you can, and you could create your brochure, for example. So going back to the question from Leslie, you could always create your brochure just in PowerPoint or on any other PowerPoint and Apple Keynote, and I don't know Google Slideshow, but perhaps the same. They usually have some pretty powerful design features built in, so you could use those. So could you use a slide deck, a slideshow, Google Slideshow, for example, for your presentation, your communication? Absolutely. My word of warning would be this. You'll notice I don't tend to use PowerPoint slides because you've heard the phrase death by PowerPoint. And so if you're having an online meeting, a Zoom meeting, for example, with a client or prospective client, then one of the things you definitely want to do is make sure that you have a good webcam. Get them to use their webcam as well, because that then creates more of a connection. You can also see things like facial expressions, and they can see you. So when you're having virtual meetings, the most important thing is the quality of how you come across, which those of you in the Online Live Academy know about, because we talk a lot about that, how to be more professional when you are online talking to clients and prospective clients. And yes, by all means, you'll want to show stuff, whether it's your brochure, your agenda, and it may be a Google slideshow. My advice to you would be is not to replace your webcam with a slideshow and just walk people through a slideshow. Use the slideshow as a prompt as you're talking about things. So if there's something you want to talk about, then like with B1G1 earlier, you can pull it up on the screen. You could pull up your brochure at the appropriate time, but don't use it to replace your webcam, because we're in the people business. The reason your clients are clients of you is because they like you. It's all about the relationship. And so when we're moving away from a physical world to a virtual world, we still need to make sure we create that connection through our webcams. And so slides should be used as a prop, not as a replacement. Hope that makes sense and helps, DD. We have 2 minutes left, so probably time for one more question. And I think it's a long one, so bear with me a second. But Tom over in London in the UK says, would asking for referrals before we have started our would asking for referrals before we have started our advisory service with a prospect or current client be acceptable? What have your views regarding this? Yes, you could ask for referrals before you start work. Many years ago, someone said to me that there are two, in the life cycle of working with a client, there are 2 times in particular that are the most powerful for asking for referrals. And one of those is right at the outset of the relationship. And so if you want to systemize your process of referrals, then you want to ask referrals when you first meet a potential client, when you sign them up. Almost make it as if it's a condition of doing business with them. And the reason why asking for referrals right at the outset is so important, is so powerful, is 2 reasons. Number one, you've not started working with them yet. So you've not had a chance to screw up, okay? So you haven't made any mistakes yet. So that's the reason why it's a good time to ask for a referral. But actually, secondly, and more important and more powerful, is that we sometimes forget, because we're so busy trying to chase clients, that actually for a client, it's a big decision. For a business owner, it's a big decision hiring an accountant or a bookkeeper. And when they first hire you, they're really pleased that you've taken them on. We sometimes don't think of it from their point of view, but they're really pleased that you've agreed to take them on, look after their business and help them out. So they're grateful that they're now going to have you looking after their business. And so this is a time where is a great time to ask referrals. It's because of the law of reciprocity. You've taken them on, you can look after their business, they're now willing to give something back. And that's referrals. When I built referral systems into my accounting firm when I was running it, I found that of all my referral systems, the single most powerful was the system I created as part of the onboarding process, as part of signing up a brand new client. That's when I got most of my referrals in the first few weeks of taking a client on. So Tom, I hope that really helps with that particular question. I notice it's now on the hour, and so we always have a hard finish at 5 o'clock here in Portugal, where it's now going dark. And so I really enjoyed this session. Thank you so much for the questions. If I've missed your question, then you can ask them in my Facebook group, or better still, come next week to the Business Advisory Masterclass, because we don't have a hard stop. I just keep going and answering questions next Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So thank you for coming along. And the next of these sessions will not be December because of other things. I've got the masterclass next week, and then it's other things. It's a short month with Christmas. And then January, we've got a few weeks out, Sarah and I have. So I will announce the date. If you're on my email list, we'll send you an email when we know the date of the next of these sessions early next year. But I will see you next week on the masterclass.